I did. And I know that we all destined for greatness, no matter what you've been facing. It's a marathon, no, it's not a sprint. It's for all of the trials and tribulations. Just look at my mom made it. I said I was gonna change it, I did. And I know that we all destined for greatness, no matter what you've been facing. It's a marathon, no, it's not a sprint. Trying to change for the better, all my city difference. From the mamas to the children, every one of us is gifted.
Good evening, the back community. Thank you as always for staying involved. Thank you for staying engaged. Welcome back to another episode for season five. Season five, this is spread love season, and we've been spreading love all season long, and we're going to continue to spread love through this episode as well. Um, on today's episode or tonight's episode, I happen to have La-Meik Cook Taylor, and I'm just gonna briefly tell you how I first met this young man, and then I figured out that we have more ties and connections to each other than I even realized. I first met him maybe 2 years ago at the Makings of a Man conference up in Albany, New York. And Cook, truth be told, I thought you was from Chicago, fam.
What?
I think you had a fedora on or something like that. I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, my man tapped in. He from Chicago or something though.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it wasn't until night until he said, "Man, he from the town, man. What you talking about, real? What you talking about?" So, anywho,
That's cool. I
today's
appreciate that.
guest on the back community is somebody who I admire. I love what he's got going on, and I think that his story is going to resonate with our audience, which is why I wanted to bring him on this platform because he is a true embodiment of what can happen when you actually invest in yourself. So, without further ado, I want to formally welcome La-Meik Cook Taylor. For the purposes of today's interview, I'm going to be calling him Cook throughout the interview. But Cook, welcome to the back community, man.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you having me. I feel honored. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, it's amazing to see you work, right? And I understand why it's amazing, but I'm sure all of our viewers, for those who are going to be watching this or for those who are going to be listening to it, they want to figure out why am I so intrigued about you. So I tried my best to give an introduction of everybody that's on the platform, but I don't think anybody can introduce you, Cook, how you can introduce yourself. So please, for the back community, please tell us who you are and what it is that you do currently.
Okay. My name is La-Meik Taylor, also known as Cook, and I am born and raised in Albany native, and currently I work for the New York State Youth Justice Institute as a senior technical assistance and training specialist. Now, what does that mean, right? So, basically, my role is to provide organizations immersed in youth justice with support and trainings that better help them allow youth to gain access to the resources that they need to make impacts in their life. This can consist of a wide variety of things, and that's what I do full time. But part time, I'm a restorative justice peer with an organization called Urban Grief. And what we do in that organization is provide spaces that allow individuals impacted by violence to deal with grief, loss, amongst other things. And on top of that all, I'm a dad, and I'm also an MBA and sustainability student at Bard College.
Salute, salute. Listen, and now you guys know exactly why one, I wanted him or I wanted you on this platform because of the accolades that you are continuing to rack up for yourself. But there's also another flip side to this story because traditionally we might not have you on this platform because of your walk of life prior to what you're engaged in now, and it's something that I'm very much familiar with because I had to walk that same or similar path myself. But one of the things that I've seen you discuss and I've seen you um, involve yourself in a conversation around is how you transformed yourself from where you were to where you are. And I know that there was a period of time where you were previously incarcerated. And the reason why I'm fascinated with what you're doing is because in such a short frame, you're really showing us in real time what can be done when you have a growth mindset, which means that I might have came from this. It doesn't mean that I need to stay there. And actually, I'm way more smarter than I have way more intellect than I ever even thought that I had at a time, just because maybe my environment told me that I didn't. But if you can expound upon that a little bit about your path that brought you to the field that you're currently working in, because I think you're uniquely skilled to be where you are.
Definitely. So, just a little brief context. Once upon a time, I was a youth growing up in Albany, and my mother struggled with schizophrenia since I was 9. My father was incarcerated and absent, and I didn't understand the magnitude of effect that this would have on me. Ultimately, as a result of me not knowing how to place words on my social experience, but also not having the proper support that I needed to communicate my issues and what I was going through, I went from an honor roll student to a youth impacted and entangled in the criminal justice system. And to be honest, I did some time as a youth, came home, was released. And, the cycle continued to county time, to multiple periods of incarceration and what they call up north or Department of Community or DOCS. And, each time I came home, I lacked something essential to me understanding that, prison wasn't something that should have been part of my life. And there was so much more that I could have did to change it. But there was so much more that the world needed to do to change the circumstances of that fact as well. So long story short, I ended up doing 3 periods of incarceration with a DIN number. And my most recent period of incarceration was 10 years, in which I was incarcerated in 2010, from 2012 to 2023. It was something about this point of incarceration that just the light flicked on for me. And it was like, I was tired, I was stressed, and I realized that I had so much more potential than to be sitting in a jail cell, wasting away my life and constantly going through that reality of being in prison. So on this period of incarceration, I had access to higher education in prison through a college and prison program called Bar Prison Initiative. Now, education was something that was instilled in me since a child. My mother was extremely heavy on education. She would practice spelling with us, cursive with us, reading, and a large majority of this was the reason why I was an honor roll student at such a young age. However, her struggles with mental illness distracted me, but at the same time, it diverted my attention away from education to, my family, my mother, the love of my life, basically. So, I fell back in love with education while I was incarcerated on this 10-year sentence, and it opened up my eyes to a whole new world. It wasn't just college and prison for me. It was a moment to begin grappling with, getting to the root cause of my issues, taking a deep look inside of myself and utilizing a critical lens of introspect that forced me to grapple with my reality and say, I'm bigger than just a DIN number in a prison cell. And from that moment on, I was dedicated to changing. I ended up gaining an associate's degree in liberal arts. I got a bachelor's degree in social studies. And also, while incarcerated, I did some intercollegiate debating, which further helped me develop my communication skills, my public speaking skills, and build my confidence overall in utilizing my story as a resource for change and my lived experience as a valuable source of knowledge. So I ended up being released 2023, July 3rd. And since that, I never looked back. I hit the ground running. Did a lot of public speaking engagements, mental health advocacy and awareness, youth justice advocacy, and criminal justice reform were things and are still things that I'm passionate about and I advocate heavily for. And I just also want to say that, I developed and gained a support system, right? Because a lot of guys re-entering society and making a transition from a carceral environment back into society lack that supportive network that would help them flourish and thrive and be able to accomplish things. And I think the biggest thing was I realized not only the traumas of my life, but the traumas that the prison industrial complex kind of like forced me to experience as a result of being incarcerated. And I was able to grapple with those traumas and utilize them in ways that essentially helped me progress forward and grow.
Listen, I've been smiling the entire time you've been speaking because I love your vernacular, right? A lot of times people that look like you and I, it's really oxymoronic when you hear us speak. You'd be like, well, wait a minute. I didn't expect that to come from out of you, and and I've heard that, and I hear that every time I hear you speak. So that is a huge testament to the amount of work that one your mom put into you and instilled in you early on, but the love that you rekindled in while you were incarcerated on that last bid, right? And it's just when we reach these places in life and we're more comfortable and we feel safe enough to just be who we are rather than what the world expects us to be, or than sometimes what we expect of ourselves to be, you really get a chance to get back to what it is that you love. So, you know, I had to take it there, but think about it. Your work with youth justice, like I said, man, I think it uniquely your skill set comes from one experience, but it also comes from real life knowledge. Like you said, it's bigger than just your experiences. It's understanding the systematic suppression and why people who grow up in certain areas may be more prone or likely to go down different paths. And so how has it been for you considering yourself as a motivational speaker, as a model to other individuals who, are either tiptoeing on that path or already going down that path, but now look to you as a resource? How amazing, or how does that feel to you?
It feels amazing. So I'll give you two sides of the coin, right? It's amazing in essence because I think that my own personal experiences under the thumb of oppression kind of for a long time never allowed me to look at myself to ever become, an individual that was even uh, authorized to be in the space that I am today. So I think for a long time, that disbelief in myself and that inability to kind of imagine myself outside of what was immediately before me, gun violence, drugs, police, and incarceration, it was just something that set a ceiling on my capacity to dream beyond and to believe in myself and understand what I was capable of. So now when I see myself in this situation, in in a position to actually help save lives, because that's ultimately what it is. It feels amazing because I was once in a situation that some individuals are currently in, are still in, some individuals are just now getting introduced to. And I feel like if I can make that impact, that change to divert them away from making negative choices or even just understanding the magnitude and the broader scope of their reality and the positions that they're in is just a feeling that allows me to feel blessed. I think it takes a lot and it's hard work. So on the flip side of the coin, it's also painful and traumatic at times, right? Because, you know, we often have survivor's remorse and I utilize that term not in the sense of just seeing an individual, let's say, for example, an individual that I'm trying to help, let's say that individual passes away. So it's not just in that moment, it's also in the moment of, let's say, an individual that I'm working with gets incarcerated, so it's moments like those that are painful and can be heavy burdens to bear because in our roles as mentors in the world now, with our level of consciousness, our level of knowledge, and our positions of power or proximity to power, we want to help save everyone. We want to help pull everyone from the trenches, uplift them, and elevate them to the point where they can realize that it's not just me. I'm not exceptional. You can be this. He can be this. She can be this. We all can be this as long as we put in the work and try. But as long as we have faith in working together and are vulnerable enough and willing enough to collaborate with other people, listen and be guided by others at the same time while utilizing our senses of direction to learn and guide ourselves in the process. So it's a level of duality to where I'm at because it's amazing, but it can also be traumatic in a sense, as far as like, just feeling guilt or shame for not being able to help an individual how you want to help them, or for looking at the outcomes of certain situations as being failures as a result of the situation not having a desired outcome.
Okay, that's a topic that I touched on in my book too when I talked about the guilt that we feel sometimes
Right.
as we make a transition, right? It's just like obviously you got love in the streets, so you got love for your family, right? And you want everybody to make the transition the same time that you making the transition. Be like, yo, it's another way to eat. It's another way of
Right.
living. It's another way of traveling. It's another way of experiencing life. Let's do this. But you got to realize that, everyone grows at their own time. And it's such a
Definitely.
hurtful experience to be and be like, no, this ain't the way anymore. This is the way. Follow me. But he'd be like, nah, man, I'm not following you, Cook. I'm not following you, Rel. He's like, oh, you soft now. I'd be like, no, I'm not soft. I'm trying to live, right? I want to
Right.
live. And, um, I think so when you talked about the duality of it all, is just like, it has to be a very unique feeling knowing that you have the authenticity to directly connect with your audience. And then it's another one is just realizing that, sometimes people might not understand the burden that you carry now as the person who's made that transition. And it might be people tugging at you to pull you this way or that way. And it's just like, how do you just keep a sane mind through it all to stay focused on the vision and the goals that you've set for yourself? How do you do
No,
that?
one way is heavy on the exercise.
Okay.
I'm like an exercise fanatic. It's my top addiction. Another way is self-care, right?
Mm,
See a therapist, right? There's this large conception that therapy is negative, that therapy is bad, or that there's something inherently wrong with you if you sit down and talk to a therapist. But I think that a large part of that conception comes from, the relationship between Black and brown people and
mm,
systems, right? So mental health systems, specifically the relationship with the mental health structure in Black and brown people, has always been negative. So as a result, there's this large level and sense of stigma around getting help when you need help. Also, we've been conditioned to believe that, you pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
yeah.
Don't tell nobody about your problems. Keep it to yourself. Push through it. And as human beings, we're social creatures, right? So the effects of that can be detrimental to your overall trajectory of life, your quality of life. And I think that, just promoting the idea that, I see a therapist, sit down, see a therapist, talk about problems. And these talks don't necessarily have just focus on problems, right?
Yep.
They could focus on the good in my life too. And I think that my passion and my experience with having a parent who struggles with schizophrenia and struggled with schizophrenia gave me a deeper level of insight into that and understanding that compassion and care, not just for other people, but for ourselves, right?
Mm,
A level of compassion and care for myself to allow myself the most essential level of minerals and vitamins to grow, not just like, multivitamins and minerals, but essential
yep.
skills as people vitamins to grow is just important. So always put yourself first, and I practice in self-care. And the last thing I have to say is being vulnerable. Being
Mm,
vulnerable helps me take care of myself because I have people that I could call on, you included, and just express myself, and they'll give me a listening ear and then give feedback or ask if I want feedback. Sometimes they're just there to listen. And I think
right.
that building up that level of support and safety network just allows us to prosper at such amazing rates. And those are some of the things I utilize to help me keep sane. And I think another thing is just spending time with my son.
Yeah.
The innocence of childhood, it allows you to be free and let down your barriers and guards, and these are barriers and guards that sometimes as human beings, our ego gets in the way of and prevents us from having that level of openness and vulnerability. So I spend time with my son, and that lets me enact in moments of play and
Yep.
goofiness and silliness, and it's just relieving that moments. You know what I mean? So I think that those elements that I just explained actually help me take better care of myself and position myself to be in the best position to help someone else because I'm also focusing on helping myself.
Hey, you hit so many different things. I'm gonna make a joke about one, right? That's the blessing of having kids, right?
Word.
I get to showcase my inner child all day, every day. I was driving the kids home from school today, and I said, "Yo, y'all know what movie's coming out this month?" And my 8-year-old goes, he says, "Sonic 3." I says, "Yes." Right? Listen, I'm probably more excited than them to get ready to go see Sonic, right? And it'd be like, and a friend of mine, Councilman Johnson, shout out to DJ, right? DJ asked me the other day, I think I was
Definitely.
taking the kids home last week, and he says, Yo, Rel, he says, you ever ask yourself this question, like, what if, you had Tyrell as a dad for you, right? Like,
Mm,
what if you had a father figure that was around like that, right? Like, what would life be like? I'd be like, yo, D, that is a really dope question. Like, I'd be like, because imagine the safety that your son has knowing that, I have a father who's emotionally intelligent, who's around and realizes that his significance in my life is important. It goes well beyond money and experiences, but it's just time. Like kids spell love, time, Time, right? And it's just like those things. So imagine if, right, you had this version of La-Meik Taylor, right, as your dad, right? Imagine if we had those safe spaces that now we're creating for other people. You're creating it for your son. I'm creating it for my sons, and it's just like, because that's going to unconsciously unlock their own potential too, realizing I don't gotta wear a mask. I don't gotta try to
yeah,
overly be hard to be something else. I can be me. And you get to those places by doing the work that you said, therapy. I'm glad you brought up therapy because therapy used to be something that was shunned, like you said, in the black and brown communities. But I got a therapy session tomorrow. I love therapy, right? And I think that it has um, enabled me to access parts of myself that I didn't know how to access as resourcefully as I can now, right?
mm,
And to be able to do it in a way that I don't lose myself in the process. So I love therapy, and I'm glad that you brought that up because that's one aspect of who we are. And I sat in on one of your conferences a while ago that you did with Rich, right?
definitely. My God.
And that was where I first heard you talk about the importance of mental health and how it was that you had to grapple with uh, the mental health and the awareness of what your mom was experiencing, and you had to come to a terms to realize that those were her experiences, right? And you didn't have to hide from that anymore, right? And because growing up where we grow up, niggas will talk shit all day about
Definitely.
anything, right? And it's just like, so I don't want to give you something
To
to
use
possibly come
against you.
at me with, but
Right.
when I heard you in that session, it was a bunch of men rapping about problems that we have,
Mm,
and it let me know that you realize and you understand the importance of mental health, right? And elaborate on that one a little bit more for me, because in that space, in about 2 minutes, I seen you take a grown man and make him feel comfortable enough to start crying in a vulnerable place. So tell me how that has been like realizing that men do need a space to talk about these issues, and that it's okay. How do you incorporate that in your work?
For a long time, right? Mental health was something that I was extremely terrified of, right? And watching my mother endure what she went through, I could never talk about it without crying or getting emotional to the point where I just shut down. And shutting down ultimately became a defense mechanism throughout my life that prevented me from communicating how I felt. And it just affected my relationship with school, with my friends, with my family, with the world. And it was actually in college while incarcerated and participating in debate union, when I developed the skills and the courage to begin to open up and utilize my story, my life experience as an advantage instead of looking at it as a disadvantage. So in these spaces, when I'm talking about trauma and mental health, I always create that level of vulnerability. I start with my story, I explain my story, I put my story out into the universe for whoever's participating in the session, because I want them to know, like, although my mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia, mental health is more than a diagnosis. And for a long time, I didn't realize or understand it, but I was having mental health issues as a child, right? Who didn't know how to engage or communicate what he was experiencing as a result of having a loved one, such as a single parent mother, raise you and three other siblings while at the same time trying to provide for you guys in battle with a diagnosis and society's pressures and stigmas of mental illness. So I realized that affected me, and I suffered from mental health issues as a child, on top of having a father incarcerated and dealing with the issues associated with disassociation or feeling lonely or feeling neglected as a child. So my adverse childhood experiences, and digging deep into them and critically analyzing them, ultimately put me in a position to understand, mental health has to be something in which the spectrum of what we know mental health to be needs to be broadened, right? Mental health isn't just a diagnosis. It can be, the single parent mother who takes care of children on her own with a husband who's incarcerated at the same time taking care of the husband, right? It could be the child who loses his brother or his best friend to gun violence. It could be, parents who are unable to get good jobs and pay their rent and take care of their children. It could be, you know, anything of that resort. And I think that it could also be, being incarcerated and going through those lapses of emotion or human connections as a result of the stigma associated with criminals are and how criminals could be treated. It can be any of these things. And I think that broadening the scope of mental health and mental um, health issues and utilizing my experience as a means of doing that is ultimately what helps me broaden the scope of what we understand mental health to be, what mental health care can be, and how we approach grappling with things that we deal with mentally that other people don't see we deal with, but create that courage and that safe space enough to allow other people to connect, relate, and express themselves in a safe manner.
Okay. Okay. I like that too, man. It made me think about how, sometimes we don't even know what people are really dealing with. Like you said,
Right.
man, you don't really know what people are really dealing with. And I remember the older I got, I realized that some of the dudes who I knew from the streets, right, that in the streets had the biggest and toughest persona, right? But when I got older, I also realized that some of those individuals were actually dealing with and coping with mental issues that went unaddressed. And it came out in a way that most of us as young black men only know. Like, if you could fight, if you could knock somebody out, right? If you could do all of the things that are probably going to get you in trouble, right? It makes you
Definitely.
attractive and it makes you respected in a lot of ways. So
Right.
imagine someone not being able to process how they feel, but through their anger, I might be able to punch a person and knock them out, right? That empowers a person to end up owning that part of their experience rather than saying, hey, help me to deal with what I'm feeling because this isn't really this isn't really how I want to showcase myself, right? And a lot of that is what I hear when you talk about mental health. We have to broaden the spectrum of it, right? And
Right.
realize that, it's not just diagnosing somebody with something and trying to write them off because all of us got mental issues. Like I battle anxiety regularly, and what I've learned through anxiety is that every last one of us have anxiety. We just deal with it a little bit differently, right? So,
And I agree with that point, and it's essential because that's what changed the trajectory of my life. That inability to grapple with the issues that I was dealing with at home, and I went from an honor roll student to someone who participated in a series of different kind of things that they label as crimes as a result of it, but it was just, I resorted to other things to utilize as outlets to express my emotions in ways that were unhealthy and negative for me. At the end of the day, I wasn't really or truly choosing myself because I didn't understand how. And I think that another point I just wanted to highlight, because you said that, we don't always know what everybody is going through, and that's important. And I think that's essential before we make our judgments. And I think to bring it even further is that sometimes we don't even always know what we going through. And to take that step back and to create or be a part of spaces that help us actually like gain that level of understanding is important. And it's all related to like mental health and, what we can do in that space, in that field.
Yeah, and empathy, right?
Definitely empathy.
It took me to when my mom passed in 2019, it forced me to reevaluate all of my friends that I had knew up to that point of life that had lost a parent, right? Because up
Mm,
until that point, I had never lost a parent. I lost friends and stuff like that, but I'd never lost a parent. And immediately, like almost immediately, it was just like, oh man, it's like this is what such and such needed from me
right.
then. Like, but I didn't know how to do it. I couldn't empathize with them because I never had the experience. So going through the experience gives you empathy to do exactly what you just said. Realize
Definitely.
that everyone's battling with their own things, and before you judge a person, take the time to figure out, what's going on with them, if you can help them or if you can't.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah. But think about well, I'm gonna take you somewhere else only because you know now you're going all throughout New York State, right? Right. You're going throughout New York State. You're helping individuals. I just seen you down here in D.C., so you're going outside of New York State, right? You're helping individuals. You are now a symbol of hope. How does it feel for you to be in these rooms? Because I think, who was it, Brian Stevenson? That was one of the keynote speakers
Oh
down here,
man,
right?
amazing.
So, how is it for
Motivation.
you being in these rooms now, knowing that your unique skill set gives you the authenticity to be in these spaces that maybe you didn't once feel like you could be in? How does that feel for you now, being going throughout New York State, being in DC, and talking about the things that you're talking about?
I think it's a lot of, it's positive, but it's a lot of pressure because now when I get in these rooms, right, and individuals in positions who or people who are in a position to kind of like help me better understand my position and my role. And I always feel like during the midst of a speech or something, like I look around because I always feel that moment like, oh man, they talking to me. So
Hmm.
I start to squirm in my seat in my chair, but it's motivational and it's inspiring because it's like I'm where I'm supposed to be. And don't get me wrong, there are times when it's like, am I doing this right? Am I performing at the level I'm supposed to be performing? That level of self-doubt at times, but it's always reawakening and kind of like recharging to be in these spaces and to brush shoulders with individuals who kind of set foundations and are helping to continuously set foundations for myself and others to know that, I'm on the right track, I'm where I belong, and they believe in me, at the conference in DC, I met a motivational speaker named Jeremiah Brown, and I told him my story. He said, "Oh, you're from New York. You in New York? Yo, I can't wait to get back to New York Connect." And then he grabbed my hand, shook my hand, and leaned in close and was like, "Listen, brother, they need you." And it's just moments like that are kind of like emotional because it's no one should have to go through such hardships to recognize their true potential and talent.
Hmm.
And it's a sad fact that oftentimes we have to go through those hardships in order to, become the person that we're meant to be, right? The caterpillar to butterfly transformation is not often as smooth as it's narrated for the caterpillar and butterfly. And for us, that transformational process is a lot rougher, but it's worth it. And it's kind of like something that allows me to appreciate myself and my experiences more and just lean into them more as a body of not only knowledge but a resource pool that allows other individuals to learn and grow while I'm also learning and growing. So it's recharging to be in these rooms, in these spaces, and it's enlightening because I'm basically, in essence, developing a path that other individuals can follow. But I'm also becoming a resource, a network, right, for other individuals. So I can then, when I'm ahead, reach back and link other individuals to me as we progress forward and work together, because that's what it's about, building community too.
Mm, mm. What about when you were younger, do you think that you would have listened to this version of La-Meik? The younger version of La-Meik, do you think you would have listened to who you are today before having to sit down a couple times? And the reason why I'm asking that is for this, is because, I can imagine working with youth right now. It's always that constant, like, well, you don't really know me. Just like, I don't really
Yeah,
trust you. And I can imagine that in all of the spaces that you're involved in, it's constantly like, well, let me disarm you because I'm not I'm not trying to talk to you. I'm talking with you. And like,
right.
how do you win over the youth? Because in working with the youth, I think that in a lot of ways they haven't been taught to sit down and to realize that not everybody is looking to take something from them or to gain something from that experience, but I genuinely want to help you. So
Definitely.
how do you think you would have listened to this version of yourself? And if not, or if so, how do you get the younger adults now to take 2 to 3 minutes to really sit down and digest what it is that you're offering them and what you're talking about?
Um, so would the younger me listen to me now? To be honest, I would say yes, right? Because whenever I enter spaces where individuals were trying to give me knowledge to directly make a change in my life, there were no individuals that necessarily looked like me, right? So I think that that was one thing, but I think that the hardest thing for me to understand or be able to make a change in my life at the moment in which I was a youth was that I never really heard about individuals talking about mental health, having a parent or sibling struggling with mental health. So it's like that's something that I felt excluded me from conversations happening about, making a change in my life, being better, that I could be
Mm,
more, because it was like I didn't feel like there was nothing relatable to me. So that was something that also allowed me to kind of shut down and resist the help and assistance that I was getting from people who were saying the right things and actually doing the right things, but just couldn't break that barrier of communication that allowed me to see myself in their shoes or relate to them. So I think
right.
that's one thing. And I think it's the biggest thing for me that I utilize now, because now I realize the intersectional points of not only mental health, but gun violence, of prison, police brutality, of racism, and all of the other isms that you could possibly think of. So my understanding of the intersectionality between these points allows me to be able to, one, when I get in situations or activities with youth, um, I create that level of vulnerability to disarm them, right? I tell them my story, and just because I come into a space and I might be dressed business casual, I might look like I've never been around a block or anything like that, or in the hood. It's like I leave with that to show them, like, wow, like that could be me, like, you know what I'm saying? So, and I do that to disarm them. So it's like their attention is at an all-time high, because if they can relate to me and understand that, I've been in your shoes, I've been where you've been, and I've also been in your shoes to the point where I felt like I didn't have anyone to communicate to. And I want to let you know and let you guys know that that's not the case. And we can't go into these spaces assuming, but we have to go into these spaces also just kind of creating that space that allows that level of connectivity and understanding, so youth can open up and utilize that voice that they have as a source of power.
Okay. Okay. All right. Do you think that having a mentor would have been a consistent mentor would have been beneficial to you as a young adult or even as an adult?
I definitely think it would have been beneficial for me. I got a lot of mentors now. I could go through my phone. I got so many mentors. It's unbelievable. And for me, it's always kind of like, especially as a result of my incarceration, right? 10 years in prison. I was released. There are some things I just don't know how to do, right? Like I'm in a relationship. It's my first real relationship. I'm learning how to be in a relationship. I had to learn how to shop for groceries. You know what I'm saying? Use a phone and things of that nature. And book flights, get ready for travel, hotels, and everything like that. So, those are smaller things, but even in a professional work setting, right?
Mm.
My coworkers are my mentors because there are a lot of things I don't know how to do. So, I think that having a mentor is a lifelong process. You can never go wrong or be too old to have a mentor or
Facts.
learn from someone else. And I constantly put myself in that position to where it's like I'm not afraid to ask a question or say that I don't know something, because in the end, I'm only stronger by admitting that I don't know. I'm stronger by asking the question to gain the insight, and I become stronger because I get the insight and I learn how to do the thing that I don't know. So I think that it definitely would have helped me growing up to have a consistent mentor who was immediately present at times when I could have possibly used them. And um, it would have changed a lot of things, to be honest.
Okay. Okay. All right. Um, I'm gonna ask one other question on here, and I'm going back to something that you talked about briefly, which is survivor's remorse,
Mm.
right? I know one of the other hats that you wear, as I say, shout out to my man up in Albany for his 518 hat. You know, one of the other hats that you wear is through your work with urban grief, right? And I want you to walk me through or talk me through the usefulness of being able to have a space to talk about grief, and why urban grief is such an important part of the community that you serve.
So I think one, the usefulness of having a space to talk about grief and loss that is that, um, especially in Black and Brown communities, is that the dynamics of grief and loss happen in layers, right? So it's not only gun violence that causes us to experience grief and loss. It can be medical illness, medical deaths, but it could also be incarceration, right? And I think that understanding and extending the goalposts for which we understand grief and loss creates stronger and more efficient and effective channels of communication, but also it creates stability for spaces that allow us to kind of begin to have talks that we really need to have and build support and networks that we really need to have. So I think that that space is remarkable, and the utility of urban grief in the capital region is important because um I didn't understand grief and loss, and it was through tools and mechanisms that I learned through Lisa Good that allowed me to understand grief and loss in a different way, that allowed me to understand grief and loss and violence, to be related to incarceration, not only for people incarcerated, but for their loved ones who kind of understand or witness them taken out of their lives for long periods of time. And I think that we all, as human beings, experience loss at some point, right? Um, People lose girlfriends or fall out with friends. That level, that sense of loss, we carry that with us. On top of, if individuals lose a loved one to death or a medical diagnosis, a surgery, or someone has to move away because they move. But I think that these levels and layers of grief and loss are essential in understanding, and it better puts us in a situation to increase our level of emotional intelligence and be able to identify. But after we identify, also act upon what we know in order to make effective changes.
Okay. And one of the things I also learned was that, uh, uh, we can grieve even over positive change,
Definitely,
right?
we can
My
grieve.
pastor has said this maybe about a year ago or something. He was like, listen, you know, we can grieve over positive change. It's gonna be like a positive change is you making a transition from where you were to where you are now. but realizing that some of the people might not have taken that journey with you. And of course, we always want to stay connected to those we love and those we have those mutual experiences with. But in order to go to where you're going, sometimes there's some people who are not going to be ready to make that transition with you,
Definitely.
right? At that time, or maybe never, right? Or maybe they will later. But you can grieve because as you are experiencing new heights and new levels of positivity, you can grieve because there's some people that aren't ready to take that journey, or their road isn't coming together how yours may be. So I've
Definitely.
learned that grieving isn't just over the negative things or the traumatic, like bad things that happen. Sometimes it's just
So
on positive change. Like, I like using this cup every day. If I was to break this cup, you know, I would be heartbroken because it'd be like, what am I going to use now?
right,
Right?
right, right,
So just realizing that there's different experiences that we all have with grief, but having the space. So shout out to you, to Lisa, shout out to Mel Brown, for creating a space to educate us on grief and how it shows up in our relationships with family, friends, and how it shows up for us when we don't process it.
right. And I agree with that point, and it's extremely important because from the outside looking in, the people that you sometimes outgrow or are distanced from as a result of your trajectory in life and the different kinds of choices that you're making, they often feel that they can't relate to you anymore. And that's not always the case. It's just that I'm learning and growing. And I think that one of the important things is always kind of like understanding the dynamics of exposure, just how we're exposed to negative things
Mm-hmm.
that lead us to make negative or poor choices. We can be exposed to positive things that lead us to make better choices. And that sense of and duality of exposure is something I try to be big on. Like, if I notice that, I'm in a situation to allow other individuals to experience a justice conference or a restorative justice retreat, then I'm going to do my due diligence to try to expose those individuals to these types of experiences and hope that it can spark a change, that it can create some form of motivation or inspiration that allows them to understand um, that it's possible to change and it's never too late.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, listen, man, I'm gonna take you through this quick session of rapid fire that I take everybody through. 60-second round, and this is gonna go back to something that you said earlier, channeling that inner child that we have. I think the older that we get, sometimes, we're so worried about how we look that we forget that, we're human beings underneath this. So I'm gonna do this quick 60-second round of rapid fire with you, and it's gonna help me to understand who you are as a person in 60 seconds. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right, listen. So what is your favorite season of the year?
My favorite season of the year is fall.
Okay, all right. If you had to choose your favorite sneaker, what would it be?
If I had to choose my favorite sneaker would be Nikes.
Nikes. All right.
Yeah.
Any particular Nike? Any particular shoe?
I'm still learning fashion. I'm not gonna lie to
Okay.
you. So,
Okay. But
but
Nike. Okay.
Nike
Okay.
yeah, it could be subject to change, but yeah, Nike.
Okay. If I know you're a gym rat, but let's say you having a tough day. What's your go-to or pick me up food that's gonna make you feel better?
Cereal,
Ooh.
preferably Fruity Pebbles or Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Okay. Okay. And if you had to choose, would you choose to be feared or loved?
I would choose to be loved every time.
Ooh, okay. Okay. All right. Last question. I'm big on music, so if you had to choose your favorite musical artist, who would it be? It could be a group or individual.
My favorite musical artist, I can't lie, is Lil Durk, man.
Okay. Okay.
It's my favorite.
Yeah. I became a Dirk fan probably last year. And Nigel probably been trying to put me on him for, Rel, listen to this. I'm like, nah, I can't. But I started watching interviews with Dirk, and I've seen his growth and the
Right.
fact that he was doing therapy. He's just like, listen, I got other levels to myself that I'm figuring out right now. I'm still him.
Definitely.
Don't get that confused. But I'm realizing I'm more than just him. The thing that got me here. So okay, I can relate to that. I can
Definitely.
relate to that.
Definitely.
All right, who won the battle? Drake or Kendrick?
I didn't even get into that battle, honestly. I didn't even have time to listen. It was just too many songs going on. And I was working, school. I just didn't have the time to really get into
Okay,
that battle.
smart
But
man, smart
Drake
man,
is my
smart answer.
son. I'm not gonna lie, I'm biased. Drake is my son. Yeah.
Let me see, man. I got two questions for you, Cook, and I'm gonna let you go.
All right.
Uh, Thinking about everything that you've accomplished thus far in your life, and I know, we're just scratching the surface of what's about to come next, man. But thinking about your life and all that you've accomplished thus far, what about your life's path are you most proud of?
I think the thing about my life's path that I'm most proud of is the impact that I can make and am making on a daily basis and the change. Um, I'm proud of that because it's like at one point in my life, I didn't think there was anything I thought there was nothing else to do but the things that I was comfortable with doing. So I say the impact that I'm making and the change because, I'm beyond my comfort zone. And I think that my ability to grow, learn, and prosper grows or broadens and increases every day. So I'm always open, always willing to listen. And it's the most thing I'm proud of because I didn't used to listen. I used to be a hardhead.
Okay, okay. And that's when you grow, you know what I mean? When you get outside of your comfort zone, that in that space is when we start to push ourselves a little bit more, be like, I normally would do this, but I'm gonna do this one because I've seen where that one has got me. So I'm gonna get outside of my comfort zone.
Definitely.
Final question for you today on the Back Community has to be my favorite question of 5 seasons. Um, if you were to describe success, how would
Mm.
you describe success?
So um it was a quote that I read, right? And it said, don't be comfortable with showing people how to get money, but find comfort. No, don't be comfortable with showing people that you have money. Find comfort in showing them how to get it, right? So
Mm,
I'll use that quote to symbolically represent money as not only, a financial aspect of life, but money as being knowledge that you acquire, money as being progressive changes that help you develop as a person, money being, increasing your emotional intelligence, increasing your psychological safety, your ability to care for yourself. And I look at that as a sense of showing that, find comfort in helping individuals gain things that can help them become prosperous outside the scope of something physical, right? Emotional, spiritual, psychological. So find value and comfort in things that are helping people grow like that. So that's how I find success, define success.
okay. Would that have always been your definition of success, or has your definition evolved over time?
It evolved over time, and tomorrow I might feel different, but today that's my definition for right now.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Hey man, before I let you go, please tell me more about that fit that you got on, man. I'm loving the sweater.
Okay, okay.
Tell me what we got going on there.
All right, so I want to give a shout out to Prince A. Madison. I mean Kuntz, my brother. This is a fit that he designed and created. It's called Jadamore. It's Prince A. Madison on all social media platforms. And Jadamore came about as a result of Amin Kuntz losing his brother, our brother, Javon Dushon Mooring, to gun violence. And he took the first two initials of Javon's name, first name, the first two initials of his middle name, and the last three initials of his last name to produce Jada Moore. So what you see right here, this
Mm,
tough fit. And I think that one of the most remarkable things about this clothing line is that it takes a negative situation and
facts.
turns it into something not only fashionable, but something that can make a positive statement and a testament to the life and circumstances that we live under and just breathe life into the world even after experiencing death. So I think that's the biggest thing at that is that despite the fact and the tragedy of Javon's death and falling victim to gun violence, that his name can still be honored and breathe life into the world through Jada Moore and Prince A. Madison. So that's my stance.
Shout out to you. Shout out to the designer behind Jada Moore as well. And you just touched on something that I live my life on: turn negatives into positives.
Definitely.
La-Meik, I love everything that you got going on, brother. I want to continue to wish you can. I want to continue to pray over you and wish you continued success in everything that you're doing, because it's not only important for what you're going to be doing for yourself in your own household, but for what you represent for so many other black and brown individuals that look like you and I, and not even just black and brown individuals, but just people in general. You
Definitely.
have humanized an experience in a way that, you can't just say that everybody's this way, right? Because I can look at La-Meik and say that, you know what, yo, I love talking to that young man. That young man has a brain. That young man is about to get his. What you about to get now? Your doctor,
A
masters or
master's.
masters?
Yeah.
Masters. There you go.
I might
You
go
know,
for the doctors next. I don't know, but
I
I
would
need
not be
to.
surprised. I would
I
not be
need to.
surprised. You
But
know what I
yeah,
mean? But continue to show people that you're much more than what they've expected you to be. Continue to show yourself that you're much more than what you've ever thought in your wildest dreams that you can become, because the sky's the limit. Shout out to you, and thank you for giving me your time, for being on the back community tonight. And I can't wait to get your story out to the people, man.
thank you for giving me the opportunity to embrace and enjoy this platform with you, utilize and uplift my voice, and just for being an essential fabric in the community. I appreciate you, man. Much love, Ty.
Always, man. I play catch up with you next time.
Definitely. Take care.
Deuces.
Good night. Bye.
It's for all of the trials and tribulations. Just look at my mom made it. I said I was gonna change it, I did. And I know that we all destined for greatness, no matter what you've been facing. It's a marathon, no, it's not a sprint. It's for all of the trials and tribulations. Just look at my mom made it. I said I was gonna change it, I did. And I know that we all destined for greatness, no matter what you've been facing. It's a marathon, no, it's not a sprint. Trying to change for the better, oh my city, see the difference. From the mamas to the children, every one of us is gifted. It don't matter where you from or where you going, we all in it. Might as well just spread the love instead of hating, just uplift 'em.